Hello, Acceleration Nation. On today's podcast, I have Lauren Greif on the podcast. She is a former executive recruiter, aka headhunter. She worked at one of the top headhunter executive recruiting, executive search firms in the world, Korn Ferry, and we talk a little bit about why recruiters and headhunters are not your friend and who they really work for. So you'll learn a little bit about that. We're also talking about the hidden job market and why it is so critical to build those relationships and really have those conversations with people that will open doors for you for roles that may or may not be open on the market right now. So get ready for another sick podcast here. And if I can ever help you with your career, to help you get more interviews, to get you more offers, to empower you to get paid what you're worth, there are 3 ways that I can help you. 1, I have a select few clients that we welcome into Kadima that work with me on a one-to-one basis. We work with you until you get a great job. Secondly, we offer group coaching. So if you need a little bit less of me, but still some access to me, we offer group coaching. And third, if you want to do it all on your own, we offer a digital course, our job acquisition method, which breaks down our growth framework that will equip you to get more interviews, to get more offers, and to get more money. So you can go to kadimacareers.com, KADIMACAREERS.com. If I can help you accelerate your career, I'm here to help. And if you remember nothing else about this podcast, the one thing I want to leave you with is own your career. Now listen up and enjoy. Hello, Acceleration Nation. I'm really excited to come back to you with another Sick Career podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Lauren Greif. Lauren, like most people I meet nowadays, are on the internet and on LinkedIn. And Lauren came up in my feed because I think some of her wisdom and inspiration on the career front. Then I found out that she had a podcast. I listened to her podcast and I was like, whoa, this woman knows what she's talking about. So I was like, I would love to have Lauren on the Sick Career podcast. So with that, let me introduce you to Lauren. And Lauren, tell the Sick Career podcast audience a little bit about you and your background.
Sure will. And thank you so much, Alan. We were having our little gush fest right before we went on there. And I also thought that SICK was an acronym for something. I don't know if you saw that in the...
It is. It's Steer Your Career with Kadima. That's why it's spelled that way.
Okay, good. Well, I don't know if I'm sick in the cool way, but I'm really thrilled to be here because I do think that you are a wonderful, wonderful thought leader, and I mean that sincerely, in this space. And a little bit about me, what you really need to know is I just simply don't want people to be victims of their job search primarily. And that also means I just can't stomach all the talent, the wisdom, the futures that can sometimes be at risk. And so part of why I ended up quitting corporate at the height of my career was because I was having a conflict within myself that said, you know what, I am just part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I don't think I could live with that 1 hour, not one more day, maybe even not one more minute. So I quit my job on a Monday at about 10:15 a.m. And thankfully, I've never looked back. I've been there. I've been there so many times, whether it's on job boards or whether it's not having any clue what the hell I wanted to do next. A question that I think a lot of people ask themselves, which I have a different way of thinking about that. And also feeling like how am I ever going to get to a place where I suppose you could call it the ikigai? Where am I ever going to get all these amazing things? Do what I love, something that the world needs, get really well paid for it, and make a difference. I'm good at it. I love it. All these things, like that seems like that's impossible. And I wanted so much so for other people to be able to access that. And so that's when I started getting real gritty and busy.
Awesome. And that's similar to how I wound up in this business. And I think the term that you're talking about when you find something that you're good at, that you enjoy doing, that the world needs and people will pay you for. I think if you look in Wikipedia, it will define that as ikigai, the Japanese
Exactly.
term of like the meaning of life or the reason for living. And it sounds like you found that. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background before you became this executive career coach and strategist. What was your background? Like I see it on LinkedIn, but please share a little bit about what some of those key experiences were that have informed your expertise.
So I had this kind of, I guess you could call it like white light moment when I was in college, where I figured out that there were two formulas that were going to work for me in my career. Business, like I love business. I love solving problems that are business related, that answer a lot of really, really difficult problems to solve. So I knew that business had to be part of it. And if there was something in there related to creativity and art, I could merge those two things, like art plus business, for me, that was like equals, yeah, I'm going to like this. So I went into the world of advertising. And I've told this story before, but it always makes me laugh because when I told my mother that I had this like brilliant idea that I was going into advertising and I was going to stay, at home for 24 hours and move to New York City, she was like, "You can't do that." And I said, "Well, why not?" She goes, "Well, advertising is where everybody does drugs, has
Hmm.
sex and is into rock and roll." And I was like, "I'm there. That's perfect. I'm
Yeah.
out. Sounds like the perfect plan for me." And I did. I left within 24 hours. And that's what started me going in my background in advertising. And after what was a really exciting career, I was like a really young vice president. I was traveling, I was doing all these things. I realized that my life was no longer going to be able to sustain that kind of pace. And at this point, I was pregnant. We didn't have like remote work back then or like 3-day work weeks or anything like that. And I just knew I was not going to be able to be jumping on planes with a baby and all that good stuff. So my ex-husband and I at the time, we left New York City, which was a real loss for me because I completely identify with New York. We've had that conversation, right? And
Yeah.
ended up going to the client side for a while. And while I didn't love the business, the piece of business that I was aligned to, I was in financial services, which pretty much put me to sleep. I also was really excited about the opportunities that it presented because you were saying how you meet everybody, online on the internet, but that back then it was like the interweb, right? It was like, ooh, what's this thing? And it was exciting to actually learn about how e-commerce was working, how things actually were changing the world of business. I did that for a long time until somebody came up to me, a friend of mine came up to me and he's like, "I just got to tell you, I think you might make an amazing recruiter. I think you'd be really good at this talent thing. You've been talking to these creatives, marketers for your whole life. And I just think that this would be a fun, pivot." And so I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll try it." And it turns out that I really, 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 really loved it. And I had the opportunity to work on massive Fortune 500 business, 100 business, 50 business, across so many different industry spectrums, and talk to so many people at so many different levels and really get deep into the trenches with them. And a lot of times, people say that they want to go into recruiting because they want to help people. I want to help people. And that is true. But there are a lot of challenges that come with helping people because sometimes they may not necessarily know how to help themselves. And sometimes the system is so broken that you can't help it. So after a number of recruiting firms, I ended up at what I thought was a term that I don't like to use, but I will. I thought that was my dream job. I thought,
Hmm.
well, if I work at the Harvard or Stanford of the world of talent, I am really going to learn a lot. And I'm also going to really be able to align myself with a level of excellence that was important to me. Boy, was that like such a fable. That did not happen. It was not anything close to what it was, at least on paper, supposed to be.
And you say the Harvard and Stanford of recruiting. is that Corn Ferry or yeah, Corn Ferry. And people don't always understand what executive search firms are, and Corn Ferry does a lot of things. But like, could you share with the audience a little bit about what a Corn Ferry or executive recruiting company does and how they get compensated and who they work for?
So let's say you're a very prestigious brand or company and you want to do a confidential search. And in order for that search to be retained, which means your client has retained you, like a lawyer would be retained, right? You are essentially working on behalf of that client. And even if they are pulling people from their portal as candidates, the the retained headhunting firm still has ownership over those candidates, right? So all of those candidates are being vetted. You're a broker, you're a middleman. You are responsible for sourcing the candidates rather, and essentially bringing slates of candidates to that client. And once they get placed, because these are not for contract roles or anything like that, these are long-term placement and very high salaries, high compensations. You as the headhunter earn a third of their first year's compensation. Sometimes it's salary, sometimes it's compensation, depending what that is. But there's a phrase that comes with this kind of person, this headhunter. And I'm going to say it. And just so you know, I'm cringing when I say this because it grosses me out. And this is like trade speak. You have to eat what you kill. So in other words, as the headhunter, you are now sourcing the clients. That's, the kill part. And then you are feeding it with the actual candidates. So you work what's called both sides of the desk.
And who is a client from a Corn Ferry's perspective? Who do they consider the client? Who do they serve?
Oh my goodness.
Who do they get paid by?
I mean, I worked on big, huge brands like CVS and Ticketmaster and just like every big marquee brand name across every imaginable sector. I mean, the whole entire business is run by practice centers, centers of excellence. So there's a retail sector that works with retail brands, and a lot of the brands that I worked with were direct to consumer brands like the Lululemons and like the Away luggage and things like that. Also, a lot of the e-commerce brands that were up and coming, not even like in that incubation phase where they're looking to build a huge team, not just a one hire. They were really like looking to scale up. That was a lot of it. And also some well established brands, that were part of that portfolio as well.
Yeah. So, right. So Corn Ferry is looking out for the best interest. Well, first for Corn Ferry and the headhunters that are killing what they or eating what they kill, but they essentially work for the CVS or the Lululemon or the company to fill the role as quickly as, well, not as well as quickly, but with a good quality individual. Usually there's a 90-day clawback, sometimes a year clawback, that you need to have that butt in the seat to last like 3 months or so. Or something like that.
Right. But what you said is true. What you said is true, Alan. It is as fast as you can because you, as the headhunter, are compensated extra if you are able to make more turns. So the faster you are at identifying the candidates and placing them, well, yeah, that's cha-ching, cha-ching, right? That's a lot of money. Instead of somebody making 5 placements a year, if you can make 8, 10, of course. Yeah, it's like turning a table at a restaurant.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy there. The more people that you can get in and out, the more the pay you can get, the more transactions you get, the more you can eat. So on the executive search side or the headhunter or the recruiter side, I find a lot of my clients, before they start working with me, they're asking me for tips of, hey, do you know a good recruiter? And I'm trying to convey to them that the recruiter is really not there out for the candidate, not for the person searching for the job, but rather they represent CVS or Lululemon or Coca-Cola or P&G or whatever company. So then you have to serve the person that's paying you, which is the client. You now support people individually, the people that are looking to get their jobs. Is that true?
Correct.
Talk about like when people think about recruiters, there are some recruiters that do care about the candidate, but if you're trying to fill roles as quickly as you can to get those tables turned over, there's probably a lot, like people do what they're incented to do. So recruiters are probably there to represent and support the client that's paying them rather than the candidate that's looking for the job. Is that a fair assumption to make?
You're actually satisfying two ends, right? You want to be building the business with your client and also doing right by the company who has hired you. So your loyalty is to at least those two first.
So Corn Ferry and Lululemon.
Correct.
And then third would be Jill Smith, who, yes,
Right.
the candidate
Right.
is coming to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know how that works. It's confusing to understand all these dynamics. I learned it probably 10 or 15 years in because when I was looking for jobs, I was like, oh, does anyone know a good headhunter? And the headhunter is helpful when they have a role that happens to match your profile. But if I just reached out to them and said, hey, I'm a good customer success executive, do you know any open roles? If they have something on their plate there, that might be beneficial. But more often than not, they'll be like, send me your resume, and then it goes into a big pile. Or do they not even ask for the resume? So my question is, should people that are seeking jobs, how should they look at recruiters or headhunters in their process? If you're a candidate trying to get a better job quickly, confidently, with lots more money, how should they look at recruiters or headhunters in the process?
So it depends on what level you're at. I think that's very important because, each firm has a different profile for who that is. So anybody at the Corn Ferry level is not going to be working with somebody who is probably under or anywhere close to $100,000, right? That compensation base isn't going to generate enough revenue for the company and for that client. They could find those people out on job boards. Recruiters who may be working with a contract to hire or even a contract role, those folks are handling more of the either early or middle management. And those people, and I've been on both sides of that. So that's a higher turn because they're probably not having a lot of contracts for over a year, maybe, a couple months or 6 months or something like that. Sometimes they can do a try before you buy, which is another way of saying contract to hire. So it does depend on where you are in your career. So the job of either a recruiter or a headhunter is exactly what you said. Put that butt in a seat. And that is predicated off of what is on in how many recs, right? Requisitions do I have that are currently in my queue, right? How many roles am I currently working on? And somebody like me would be working on anywhere between 15 to 18 roles at a time.
Wow.
And let's just say you have 5 candidates in each one of those roles. It's a lot to keep track of, which is why sometimes you may not hear back from that recruiter because there's a lot to juggle, even with technology and all those kinds of things.
Right.
A lot of moving parts. This person's in their 3rd round. This person, this one is stalled. It literally is like planes, trains, and automobiles. So it definitely requires a lot of agility. So the point that I think we want to impress is that they have a very specific job to do, and there's a number on their back, right? Because the client doesn't want to wait all day. They have an urgent need on their end. They need that person to do that job now, yesterday, fast. This person's going on maternity leave. It's not like you're going to tell her, oh, by the way, don't have the baby. They need this person now. So a lot of it is putting out fires, especially if they're on the mid-tier level where, again, that placement is more of an ad hoc, interim kind of like project base. So it's really important that you understand that the recruiter's job, like you said, isn't to serve you, but also they're only going to work with the information that they have literally in front of them. They do not make interpretations. They're not going to be able to say, oh, you know what? You look like you might be a wonderful candidate for this role. even though the keywords, your experience, and just because you say you want to go into sustainability and you have nothing on your resume, they're not going to be able to just pull it out of thin air because they have to answer to these other people, and it would waste their time if you're just going to throw a candidate right in front of that client and they're going to be like, where's this experience? Why would I want to trust this person to do this job? So
Right.
you have to connect the dots for it.
And you mentioned before, so if Korn Ferry or Russell Reynolds or Egon Zehnder or whatever search firm we're talking about are representing, say, Coca-Cola for a VP of digital marketing, let's just say that, and the role is scheduled to be like $350,000 role. How does a recruiter get involved when it comes down to negotiation? Like, if that client negotiates for a higher salary, say 400,000, do they still get the 30% of the 400,000 or the 350? And where is the recruiter's motivation to just get the deal done or to help the candidate to negotiate?
There's a term for it that I must have forgotten when I left that thing, but the point is that there's a delta in between there, and whatever the final number is the 30% that they get, not what you negotiated in the beginning. So it works in the recruiter's best interest to get you more.
Oh, interesting.
Or the headhunter.
Okay. At that point, once you get to the offer stage, once Coca-Cola wants to hire me to be their VP of digital marketing, then you're okay working with me and saying, hey, Coca-Cola, it's 350 here. You can probably ask for more.
We're going to go in and ask for more. We're going to be assertive about that. And sometimes, it's not just cash, right? It's not just money. I mean, I had situations of, a woman that we negotiated a contract with, and she was on a long commute. She needed a new car and she was driving a BMW. And so they essentially paid for her to have a new BMW to get herself to work.
And then you put in that $70,000 on the top, and then you guys got 30% of it.
No. In that case, we did not. That was not part of her compensation. That was part of a benefit.
Got it. Okay. I guess it depends on how the contract
so I think
is
she got less on the
negotiated.
sign-on bonus or something like that.
So you talk a lot about this hidden job market of unposted jobs. And it's like kind of a non sequitur here, but I do want to go into this because it's actually a lot of these executive search jobs, the headhunter jobs, are kind of hidden because they're not marketed. Usually the headhunter is going out to search for people. But talk about the hidden job market and how you help people identify these roles that may not be visible to all. Like,
Sure.
What's the definition of the hidden job market? Why are those roles hidden, and how do you help people find them?
I realized that I did a really poor job at answering the question about the piece about what do they need to know about recruiters. I know we touched on this, but I'm going to parallel this with respect to this question now. First of all, the hidden job market just means jobs that are not posted for several reasons. Number one, our economy is driven by mid-sized companies. Some of them are not able to afford the cost for posting these jobs and the man hours that it takes to be able to vet through all those candidates. Number one. Number two, just the way your life is changing all the time, so is it at any company. Somebody is moving departments. Somebody is moving to another city to be closer to their in-laws. Somebody, had a personal issue in their organization, in their family, and needs to take a leave of absence and doesn't end up coming back. Some person is going to be let go. There's a new project. We just have it in our heads. We're not even sure when we're going to start recruiting for this role. We don't have a job description. We don't even have a confirmed budget. But now I bump into Alan. And by the way, he just seems like somebody that is reading my mind. So this happens all the time. Statistically, and this is always up for grabs, I used to get nailed on LinkedIn. Oh, you're such a liar. There is no hidden job market. You're making this up. I'm like, okay, whatever. 80 to 85% has been the understood amount of inventory that is below the surface, under what is visible. What you see on LinkedIn, job boards, that's apparently open roles. But even in those cases, you don't know, because there is no legislation or governing body that says, you know what? We need to validate that this is a real job. And in some cases, they're putting that up to pipeline candidates for when and if they need that pipeline of, expertise to be able to fill other open roles. So there's lots of, I guess you could say, like dirty little secrets that happen outside of what you see on the public face of job opportunities. And why I feel so committed and passionate to this area is primarily because as you become more senior, all of your opportunities will come from places that are built off of referrals and relationships. If you're doing it right, you will find yourself at some point in time in your life when you cross this invisible line and what you've been doing doesn't work anymore. What I mean specifically about that is that techniques and strategies of applying, while they also have a high level of exhaustion rate and very low ROI, the truth is that at some point in time, depending on where you are in your career and the industry and what you're looking to do, the alignment will become more important than just filling the job itself. You'll have more criteria. You'll have kids. You'll have less time. You'll have a different understanding of the politics within the organization. You'll maybe trade off time at home versus travel versus compensation. So the variables will change at every single point in our career. And people who you have built those relationships with can also help you leapfrog over areas of gaps in potential in your skills. Sometimes it's like, well, I don't really care that this person doesn't know this skill. We know he can learn it, and we just want him there. He's an amazing leader. Or she is just like such a catalyst for this kind of transformation.
Yeah, and I think those conversations can sometimes create a role. So if you're talking to somebody and they're like, wow, Lauren is really great with talent acquisition and it's something that we need maybe 6 months down the road, but we found her now, let's open up this role, or let's get her butt in this seat now and rather short circuit our search. So I've seen that happen a lot, and I've hired some people before where I've run into people and I've kind of gone to my boss and said, hey, can we open up a headcount earlier to fill this role? But I have also seen that those roles get posted online, but they usually get posted quickly and they come down quickly. So I might talk to you, Lauren, and say, hey, Lauren, we want to hire you here as our head of talent acquisition. I have to post this as per company guidelines. I'm going to post it for 3 days. Get your application in. And so you'll know about it, but you have to be, you will know that because you had that conversation with me ahead of time.
Exactly. So and often in that situation, there's a pre-identified candidate. They do that for like legalities and cover your ass and all that kind of reason. They have to put that up there. They want to make sure that they're compliant, but really there's a pre-identified candidate behind the scenes, and they're like, just let me go through these motions and get you in the system, and then we'll shut it down after that. So that can happen very much. But another thing that you said, Alan, is really important. In our world, what we do at Portfolio Rocket all the time is we don't, of course, wait for open roles, and we don't even rely on just those relationships. We make sure that if you, client in my case, see that there is a whole opportunity gap with that company and you have a solution that you are hell-bent on being able to deliver to them, do it. Write the job description, create the role for yourself. They call it job crafting. Some people call it that, or sometimes I call it the strategic lob. You know what? Here's what your competition is doing. Here's an opportunity that I see has yet to be delivered through your organization. Here's why this makes sense. Here's what I can do. Here's the ROI, et cetera.
And I've seen that work well, and it's worked for me at small organizations. So I was able to get to the Brooklyn Cyclones and kind of craft my job there. And I was able to do it at a small startup. It's probably harder. Like, I have not seen that occur necessarily when I was at Google and Facebook at these big companies where they're hiring in mass. So the job crafting, and I think there's probably a different strategy that one should take depending on the sort of organizations that they're targeting. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I mean, I had a client do it at Kaiser. So that was probably that was pretty huge, big company. She was in the process and got rejected for the role that was like the perfect thing. And then she went back to them and said, "You know what? I'm okay that I lost out on this opportunity, but here's where I could really make a difference." And they made that position for her.
So, something else is interesting on your LinkedIn profile besides talking about the hidden job market. You say in your title, the community of non statistics. Would you mind expounding on that a little bit more and how that relates to you and your background?
I'm not going to dumb it down. I mean, we all know it can feel so dehumanizing to go through an applicant tracking system, and you're basically feeling like a number. You know, a lot of the harsh reality about being quote unquote on the market means that you are in a competitive set. You are constantly like vying against a lot of different numbers. And I like to encourage the community of folks that we work with and the clients from Portfolio Rocket is to be in that top 1%. And what I specifically mean by non-statistic is this idea of the need to be remarkably different. And what that looks like on the spectrum as far as decision maker or the hiring manager's point of view is that probably anywhere between 90 and 95% of the candidates who are in the running for that role meet the qualifications of the job description. They just get to cost of entry, right? And sometimes it's like, oh, MBA preferred. But what that means is everybody who's in that running has an MBA. There's nothing special about you going after that role with an MBA because they've already pre-selected you. So don't think that that's going to like win you some big points because everybody there is playing off of the same credentials. So they're stopping at average. They're stopping at meets the requirements. And what makes it a little bit, interesting is that people often, or a lot of folks that I work with and over the years have said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take more courses. I'm going to get another certification. I'm going to, up level my skills in this area. And what I want to say is education, great. Skills are fantastic. You will always be losing the game of better because better is exhausting. There will always be somebody better. And by the way, there's going to be a better coach than me, and there's going to be a better mom than me, and there's going to be a better wife than me, and there's going to be a better whatever. Because you're not talking about better from your standpoint, you're talking about better in their eyes. So what I'm looking for is for you to be remarkably different. And when you are remarkably different, that is a place that you can own because nobody can take your difference away from you. Because I don't know about you, Alan, but there aren't a lot of Bee Gees fans on LinkedIn. And that's something that I put out there. I didn't do that like to be necessarily remarkably different. I did it because that's part of who I am. If you go to my profile, it says for every Bee Gees fan, and I'll never take that off. Right? I don't care. I like that is really like a big deal for me. And finding those ways to be a pattern interrupt. There's so much sameness. My dear friend and colleague, Kevin D. Turner, always talks about personal blanding, not personal branding. And so you want to stop the scroll. You want to be somebody who sets themselves apart and is memorable. And what makes you remarkably different happens at every single touch point in that search. It's how you send an email. It's the voicemail on your phone. It's the way you answer your questions. Better still, it's the way you prepare your questions. Mm-hmm. It's at the level of research that you do. It's how courageous you are with video, things that other people aren't doing. Because once they see that, they start scratching their head and thinking, did you guys see that email that came in with that video with Susan or with Paul? Yeah, they remember that because so few people are doing it. Yeah. And if you want to test this theory, ask yourself how many emails you get a day and how many personal cards outside of your birthday you're getting a week.
Well, most of mine are going to my old address because I haven't updated all my postal records yet. So I'm probably not getting a lot, or maybe no one's writing to me. Also, on that note, that's why I always encourage people on their resume, which again, recruiters or hiring managers are only looking for 60 seconds, but the interests at the bottom. I always encourage people to put some interests down there and something that's unique. I put like that
Totally.
I'm a credit card point junkie and I listen to a lot of podcasts and I'm a world traveler. And it's amazing. About 25 to 50% of interviews glam onto something about that. And then it creates an immediate rapport with the interviewer. And because interviews are not perfect, it's really about influencing and getting someone to like you. So we're running a little low on time, Lauren. So I do have two more questions for you. One, it is called the Sick Career Podcast. So, what is your sickest piece of career advice that you would leave ambitious professionals with? If you can have one piece of sick advice to give my audience.
Please, 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 please. I'm not going to beg, but I just said please 5 times. Stop asking yourself the question, what do I want to do next? And ask yourself, what problems do I love solving and want to continue solving? Because the problems you don't want to solve anymore, take them away. Drill down on the problems that you love to solve and that you're good at solving, because that's why decision makers hire you, because you know how to solve that problem. If everyone could solve that problem, it wouldn't be so hard to fill the job. So
Yeah.
be the unicorn and figure out what problems you're really great at solving.
I love that, and play to your strengths. So if you're good at something, if you're good at getting people great jobs, do that. If you're good at detail orientedness and program management, lean into that. And then the last question I have for you, as we're running a little low on time, is for other people that want to find Lauren Greif, where can they find you?
Come find me on LinkedIn. I hang out there a lot in the LinkedIn hood. And you can also check out my podcast at Career Blast and a Half. I have a new website coming, so I don't want to send anybody to my website that is not like at my level of where I want it to be, which is coming in August. So I'm really fired up about that.
Great. And I do highly encourage you to follow Lauren on LinkedIn. Her name is spelled L. Obviously, we're going to have it in the podcast, but for those of you listening, driving, riding a bike, or whatever, it's LORENGREIFF, but it's pronounced Greif like life.
Thank you so much.
Lauren, thank you so much for the time. Thanks for accepting my connection request. I think I might have reached out to you. You might have reached out to me. I don't even remember anymore. But it's always great to meet people in the field and talk shop and learn things about the hidden job market and how headhunting really works and why they're not your friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much.